We're now going to shine a light on Latin America and hear from 3 activists resisting dictatorship in Nicaragua, Cuba, and Venezuela. So to begin, I'd like to invite Hamlet Lavastida, who is an artist and a former political prisoner from Cuba, to take the stage.
Good afternoon. My name is Hamlet Lavastida, and I am from Cuba. I'm honored to be here. In September 2021, I was released from prison in Cuba after I signed a statement with my condition of release. I agreed that I would stay in silence, that I would not talk about the Cuban government or about my time in prison, but I am today here to tell you everything. I grew up in Cuba in the 90s. And unlike previous generations, we never romanticized the Cuban generation, the Cuban revolution, because we could see it for what it was, what it really was: despotism and brutal corruption. Fidel Castro will always say that we are his family. But as a kid, I was like, okay, we are your family, but where is the food? Why you don't provide to us? We stood in long lines to buy bread. There was no meat, no oil, no moral values. We thought that it would be short-term. No, 93 passed, then 1994, 1995, 1996, 1997. That's when the Cuban people really lost hope with their government. We live in the West Coast. I live in the West Coast, small town called Santa Fe. And we could pick up some FM radio station from the US. It is how somehow I learned English. But it's also the first time I heard Cuban exiles talking critically about Cuba, that it was another Cuba, another vision, and another history. Inside Cuba, we understand what was happening, but we never talk about it. It was too dangerous to speak it out loud. Even when we saw thousands of people living in rough in August of 1994. In 1998, I began studying at the Academy of Fine Art in Havana. Then I started doing research on Cuban and Russian propaganda. I started noticing that the people who disappeared from Cuban history books, the names no longer listed in the caption, the face missing from a strategically edited photo. The revolution has a way of devouring his own children, as we can say. Revolución es como saturno, devoran a sus propios hijos. Political propaganda and censorship are so natural to the Cuban experience that we don't even think about it. And that's why I decided to use their own propaganda against that propaganda in my artistic practice. But I knew that my art will not be welcome in the country, so as my career grew, I repeatedly left the country for residencies and exhibition. I knew as early as 2003 that the Cuban authorities were surveilling me. These authorities are the Departamento de Seguridad del Estado, the State Security Department. Cuban artists and their supporters have faced intimidation and attacks by the authorities for years. But in 2018, the government issued a Decree 349, a new law that prohibited all artists from operating in public or private space without prior approval by the Minister of Culture. You could not hire an artist without the government blessing. An artist could not sell their work without permission either. In other words, they legalized censorship. More than that, they legalized cultural violence and repression. And we were going to stand for that. The San Isidro movement was born to revoke the Decree 349. That's how everything started. For 2 years, our community of activists and artists grew. When rapper and artist Dennis Solis was arrested in 2020, a group of artists went on a hunger strike for the Movimiento de San Isidro. The police surrounded, cut the internet, and arrested them. The next day, the 27N group was born, 27 of November, 27 de noviembre, demanding that the government and the cultural officials stop repression and censorship. In April of 2021, we wrote and signed a manifesto stating that we want to live in a country that is inclusive, democratic, sovereign and prosperous, equitable and transnational. And we demand political freedoms, economic freedoms, the legalization of independent media, the right to assembly, the right to collective organization, political participation. That same month, I debuted a solo exhibition at Kunsthaus Bethanien Gallery in Berlin that consisted of 2 large-scale installations of paper cutouts on what it was a massive transcript of the police interrogation of a Cuban photographer and artist Javier Caso in 2020. One was a letter written by the Cuban poet Alberto Padilla in 1971 after a brutal 39 days of imprisonment where he was forced to denounce his own work as a counter-revolutionary and also himself as a traitor. They were exactly 50 years apart, and yet it seems like nothing had changed. When I returned to Cuba on June of 21st, they sent me to a quarantine center for 5 days. Even though I was vaccinated and had a negative COVID test, then I was arrested immediately and sent to Villa Marista prison, same prison in where Alberto Padilla was psychologically tortured in 1971. They accused me of instigating to commit a crime because an idea that I shared with the 27N group to stamp some currency with logo for San Isidro movement and 27N group. That idea never happened, but I was arrested just for thinking it and just for saying it. For the next few weeks, they interrogated me every single day. Then, on July 11, thousands of Cubans took to the streets to protest because they wanted freedom. It was the largest demonstration that Cuba had ever seen. After that day, we detained thousands of peaceful protesters and charged them with crimes like public disorder, terrorism, sabotage, contempt. Many of them end up in Villa Marista just like me. I saw them. I saw a 16-year-old boy, Yanquiel Perez. His name, until today, is not in any list. He is invisible. After the protesters started, my interrogation escalated. They escalated their threats, suggesting that I will be tried for instigation to a rebellion or sedition, which carry out 15 to 20 years prison sentence. After the first month, I started to think that I was moving to another prison, that I would never be released. Sometimes I think that I'm still there. When you are an artist, you develop a certain sensibility for sound, music, beauty, horror, and terror. Prison is the worst place for a person, and for an artist, it's even worse. They held me in a small prison cell with the three other inmates on the top of the floor of the state security headquarters. They never leave you alone because they knew that you could commit suicide. The lights were on the 24 hours a day. A TV in the hallway played Cuban television and propaganda all day long, and you can listen to that TV. You could hear people talking, but you start to lose touch with the reality. You don't know what was real or what was fake. I saw and I heard other prisoners lose their minds too, screaming from other cells. They said something like, "Oficial, ¿dónde está mi amigo? Asesino, me quieren matar, pero no voy a decir nada. Yo no soy un chivato." I heard stuff like that. In interrogation, they tried to force me to confess, first saying that I was taking orders from the US State Department, then that I was being managed by secret agents in Poland, Germany, and Spain, and so on. I refused it. In September, I contracted COVID-19, and I was sent to the prison infirmary. They never notified my family about that, or any relative. Then I learned that the police wanted to make a deal with my then partner poet, Catherine Bisquet, for both of us to go to Europe in exile. Dozens of agents escorted us directly to the Jose Marti, kind of very weird VIP airport, without saying goodbye to our families. They agreed to extend my Cuban passport for 2 years, but with a warning. If you continue to criticize or antagonize the Cuban government and you try to return, Villa Marista will be waiting for you. Today, I live in Germany, and I continue to work for a democratic Cuba, and I believe that is more closer than you think. The reason that the government is acting so strong is that they know they are losing. That soon an independent tribunal will summon them. Until that day, I will never stop talking about Cuba and raising awareness with my art. Today, Cuban society is in horror, but the government also is in panic. Thank you very much.
Berta?